session is talking about who is targeting us. And so the agenda for the day is as follows. I'm just going to introduce Blueliv in terms of who we are and what we do. Talk a little bit about the evolution of threat intelligence as well, the benefits, the value to the business, and also talk about one of our blog posts around demystifying threat intelligence. A short section on what are we seeing out in the market. There's continuously changing, continuously evolving market, and also tying that in with our recently published dark commerce report. It's important to highlight to you the way that we collect intelligence, because that's absolutely key in order to send that back to our customers to act upon. And then we're talking about the modular approach that Blueliv take to cyber threat intelligence. And then, as Mark says, we can have any questions there. So yeah, don't worry about screenshotting and things like this. The presentation will be sent out afterwards, in addition to the recording as well, if you want to pass that on. It's an interesting space, threat intelligence, and I've been at Blueliv for about a year or so now. Prior to that, I was at ServiceNow and Gartner and WebSense and Symantec, and it's certainly a very fast-paced area, the threat intelligence space. It's very competitive, but it's continuously moving, continuously evolving, and I feel like we're doing a really good job in terms of working with our customers to add value. If you're not familiar with Blueliv, we are based in Spain, so we're headquartered in Barcelona, and so for me it's very different as opposed to flying to East Coast and West Coast America, working for a European company. And something that occasionally comes up with our customers, certainly from Europe, is it's a nice point that we are a European organization. There's a number of US organizations providing similar type of services where their data centers are outside the US, and that could potentially fall trap to the Cloud Act or the Patriot Act, where some of that data needs to get retrenched or pulled back to the US. So whereas we're European based, we don't see that as an issue going forwards. So Blueliv, who are we? We're a European leading cyber threat intelligence provider, and quite an appropriate image there with lots of the space exploration stuff that's going on. And absolutely, we're based in Europe, but we have organizations all over the globe that we support and we work with. The basics are that we continuously scour the open, deep, and dark web for customer-specific targeted threat intelligence. We're using the power of automation to help with that, so that we have a lot of speed and a lot of scale as well. Once we've retrieved that information in different formats, we then present it back in an easy to action way, either within our portal, our ThreatCompass portal, or integrating it with existing security solutions that you may already have within your organization. One of the key differences between Blueliv and other threat intelligence providers is that we have a specific modular focus. So for our customers, if they want to prioritize over certain areas, whether it be looking at credentials or looking at the dark web, then it's very easy for them to select their use cases and prioritize those, as opposed to buying a much bigger solution, which they may only use a small percentage of. So the value and the return, and also the ability to scale up quickly, is absolutely there with Blueliv. Now, in terms of the evolution of threat intelligence, about 15 years or so ago is where we're starting off with threat intelligence 1.0. And that's very much generic report-driven intelligence, and it's also very historical. So it could be a few months old before you actually get to that and find the value from it. So we've evolved, and now probably about 8 or so years ago, where threat intelligence started to become vertically aligned. So whether it was financial services, healthcare, insurance, we're getting closer, but it wasn't specifically targeted to the organization. It was specifically targeted to the actual vertical itself. And again, very much historical, very manual as well. So lots of manual processes, and often needing a highly skilled security team in order to get value from the platform, which was very feature rich. And as I mentioned, you may or may not utilize much of that platform. And now where we are and have been over the last 5 or 6 years is what we're calling threat intelligence 2.0, which is around targeted intelligence, continuous, so it's in near real time, delivering the results. We utilize limited intervention, human intervention, so we have a labs team that continuously back up some of that data, but the majority of the data that we're providing is automated. And as I mentioned, the modularity of our solution enables customers to only pay for what they utilize. And so that's key. And the reason why it's targeted threat intelligence is because of the parameters that you put into ThreatCompass, which is our SaaS portal. The parameters you put in include things like domains, IP addresses, and keywords. And with that, you then enable us to then, like I say, scour the open, deep, and dark web to pull back that relevant information. So whether it's something specific to your domain, something specific to a mobile application that you may have, a conscious coverage of branding and brand awareness as well. So there's lots of areas that we can help with, and that's continuously evolving as well. So what are the benefits of threat intelligence? It's much better understanding of who the attackers are, what are the risks, and what is happening outside of the perimeter. So that's absolutely key to know what's going on and feel comfortable that you are covered with a solution that's continuously looking out for you. The speed to respond to issues is incredibly important. There was a recent report by Ponemon and Exabeam, a SIEM provider, which was looking at the time SOC teams were looking into issues and breaches. And it turns out that a number of larger enterprises are spending 25% or so chasing false positives. So threat intelligence and being so targeted ensures that the number of false positives is reduced, therefore speeding up your time to resolve those issues and maximizing what you can do with the headcount that you have. Threat intelligence is also used to inform security decisions and roadmaps as well. So we've recently published a blog around threat intelligence improving vulnerability prioritization as well. So we can highlight some of those gaps. When we find things, you can track back and highlight those gaps and understand what has happened and how that piece of information was out, or why people are starting to target you as well. And then a really key point is that we integrate with a number of other security solutions that you may have. So we have an open API and an SDK that makes it very easy for us to integrate our information into existing solutions, whether it be a SIEM or an orchestration and response solution. And we work with the likes of Logpoint and other providers to ensure that that is automated and as smooth as possible. In terms of that automation, it's continuously evolving, and that's absolutely key. The type of companies that we deal with are a real big mixture. So we deal across customers within finance, insurance, telco, the usual kind of tier 1 threat intelligence organizations that have larger budgets for security, and we're absolutely starting to see a lot more customers within the smaller security areas or smaller organizations who are looking to ensure that they are protected as well. And not only is it down to the size of the organization, but it's also relevant for the security maturity of the organization as well. So absolutely, the more mature organizations will have a SIEM or a SOAR or such in place, and a team to help with that. But we can actually work independently as a portal on its own to enable organizations that are a much lower security maturity to know that they have coverage and continuous monitoring of those digital assets externally. And what this helps with is a much more productive team. And so what we're gonna, I'm sure, start to see over time, given the pandemic of what's going on, customers and companies are gonna start having a number of different headcount freezes. So enabling those organizations to do more with the resources they've got is absolutely important. And what type of value does this bring to the business? Increasing security maturity for those external threats, and as I mentioned, helping to plug those gaps. We can also help to reduce fines when it comes to things like GDPR by demonstrating that you have a proactive approach to external threats, and to restrict the amount of reputational damage that may well have happened from some type of breach, and enabling organizations to be more proactive. Now, despite organizations spending lots of money on endpoint protection, data loss prevention, firewalls, breaches and leaks still absolutely do happen. So cyber threat intelligence can really help to identify those blind spots, and as I mentioned, fill those gaps and work your way back in terms of ensuring that you are covering what you need to do. And because it's an automated solution, it's something that you don't have to continuously you don't have to continuously research and log into. You'll be alerted to intelligence that is found, and that you are then conscious that you can that we're continuously looking after your digital assets online and reducing the potential harm and loss. Now, I'm not expecting you to read all of this, but I just wanted to highlight a few of those areas. I think threat intelligence 10 years or so ago, it didn't get a particularly great name because of the vast array of intelligence and information that was being provided, and that could lead to lots of different views, such as and false positives potentially as well. And we've come a long way from those days. So we posted a couple of blogs, and the link is at the end of the presentation, which is talking about demystifying what threat intelligence is and what threat intelligence isn't as well. So things like not necessarily an avalanche of false positives. It's not just a threat intelligence platform, which is more for those more mature organizations when they're taking lots of different feeds in. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a heavy cost to it as well, an enterprise class cost to it, partly because of our modular approach, so that people can pick and choose and get a return on the investment very quickly from those specific areas. So what are we seeing in the marketplace at the moment? Cyber threats are absolutely becoming increasingly diverse, sophisticated, and malicious. And tying in with the dark commerce report that we put together recently, it very much is the underworld is really starting to mirror the commercial world as well. So we're seeing, and have done for a little while now, things like dark web Friday sales, reductions in pricing to ensure people are using their denial of service attacks or malware kits and things like that. The criminal world is providing 24/7 support. They're looking for crowdfunding to help ensure uptime and making sure that organizations are or those other criminals are supporting them. They've even added gamification to that to see who has the best platform and the best success rate when it comes to these malware kits and exploits as well. So that also includes customer satisfaction and then publishing uptime for dark markets as well. So we're absolutely seeing that mirroring what is happening in the commercial world, and now stepping up to be much more, those criminals are stepping up to be much more organized in their approach and looking to cast the net wider. Whilst a lot of people are on lockdown, not many people going out, it enables people and individuals to quickly skill up and be able to start utilizing this criminal malware, to start using it and creating their own breaches and going from there. There's absolutely a skill shortage in the marketplace, and lots of people have been publishing information about that. So one of the things that Blueliv we're trying to do there is ensure that our products are simpler to use, and so that makes employees a lot quicker, and utilizing automation as much as possible as well. So that can help bridge the gap when it comes from to a skills shortage, so that newer people that are newer into the security organization or into security itself can become productive much quicker. Password hygiene has been and always currently will be a real issue. So we're calling it account checking Armageddon, whereby those criminals are reusing lots of different passwords that have been seen in past breaches, because a lot of people don't change their passwords dramatically from what it might have been 3 or 4 years ago. Therefore, password hygiene is even more critical and important, certainly when it comes to credential breaches. We're seeing a much more increased sophistication when it comes to remote access Trojans as well, starting to uninstall antivirus and getting to a much heightened level of sophistication, becoming much harder to track and trace as well. The Monero cryptocurrency has been around for quite a while, but the underworld is starting to utilize that a lot more because it's difficult to track back. Things like Bitcoins and stuff like that is much more, isn't as undercover as Monero. So we're seeing a lot more usage with that. And as part of the dark commerce paper that we've done, we go into a bit more detail about what are the prices for the malware kits, where are we seeing, what's the geographies this is coming from. And so this is important for you to understand more about this information. We're still seeing an increase in ransomware and mobile attacks, and part of the problem there is that companies are still paying up. So that's a real challenge in terms of how to counter that. So we're continuously looking at what is how many companies are paying up that information for that information, and are those criminals sticking to the word as they've got that data and have it hostage. As I mentioned, the dark commerce report is talking about how times have changed. Many years ago, this used to be hacking used to be much more about notoriety, status, being known to be the person to have done that hack, and so things have much more changed, and as I mentioned, gone much more commercial. So now what they're looking to do is looking at new strategies for increasing their revenue and reducing their risks to get them as far away as possible, or further away from the actual attacks themselves, and taking a revenue split with the people that are using their systems. And so they're trying to make it accessible as possible. And one of the key outcomes from the dark commerce report is the actual skills level, and also the hardware level that is needed now to be able to provide and to be able to run these campaigns is much lower. So the actual report itself talks around the different popular malware types that are available, which is really useful to understand. It's talking about the different cost for those different Russian language forums. So what else is how much people are charging, and as I mentioned, the skills level for attacks is absolutely reduced, so it's easier for people to ramp up with limited knowledge. The report goes into a lot of detail about the geographical coverage for specific groups, and those different industry actors as well. So there's links to that at the bottom there, and also at the end of the presentation. So in terms of how Blueliv approached this, information gathering is massively important. So the top area there is talking about those areas that we scan across the internet. So we don't do anything within organizations. We're only looking outside the perimeter, taking an outside in view to it. So we're scanning the open, deep and dark web, as I've said. We have our labs team that are continuously looking at that, continuously evolving the sources that we're collecting that from. We're capturing information from public, private, and our own community sources as well. And then we've got our own technology that we're using and that we have been using for many years now. As an organization, we've been around for 10 years, and the product ThreatCompass has been around for at least 6 years now. So the technology for us has advanced massively. So our web crawlers, our effectiveness of the web crawlers that we're using, our effectiveness of the malware reversal capabilities that we have, sinkholing capabilities as well when it comes to actually capturing credentials and passwords from botnets, as well as things like credit cards from compromised point of sale as well, is really important and something that Blueliv are really good at. And then we've got our honeypot network that we are continuously learning from. Over time, that's continuously evolving, and we're looking to understand what are the criminals doing with those unpatched, unmonitored servers, so that we can learn from that. All of that information comes back to us, and it's then enriched. We're using different algorithms to make sure that we're presenting that information back in an easy to see and an easy to use format. We're also using things like machine learning when it comes to some of those malware elements and malware scanning. And we have 3 delivery methods for that. The first one that we're talking about, which is what we're focused on today, is ThreatCompass, as I mentioned, our SaaS portal for targeted threat intelligence. We've also got the Threat Exchange Network, which is a free to sign up community. We have about 2,000 to 3,000 security specialists that are continuously adding to that. As an organization, security companies can't do everything ourselves, so that's where we looked upon the community, very much a community player. So there's lots of useful free information through the community Threat Exchange Network. And we also provide machine readable threat intelligence data feed, which is covering lots of different areas such as crime servers, attacking IPs, bot IPs, malware hashes, and hacktivist indicators as well. So that's more for the slightly more mature organizations who might then look at the data feed and look at some of the modules from ThreatCompass as well. So that's how we collect the data, how we process the data, and then also how importantly we deliver that data as well. So as I mentioned, we have a number of modules. These are the 10 modules that we have as part of ThreatCompass. So we're talking about retrieving compromised credentials in near real time. So what that enables organizations to do, and the value from that, is really it enables them to close down those accounts if needed, update the passwords absolutely if needed, and absolutely it gets them ahead of the criminals so that you can be much more proactive in your approach if something has been found. Domain protection is around tracking those illegitimate entities and people that are setting up phishing sites and trying to pass off their website as your website potentially. Credit card theft is very specific to banking organizations, those organizations that provide their own credit cards, but there's also a use case there for large organizations that provide their own credit card facility for employees when they're a much larger organization. So we can type in the BIN number within our portal, and we can then look and retrieve that information for stolen credit cards and credit cards in real time as well. Now, the dark web is something that we're seeing growing a huge amount within our customer base. Customers really want to understand who is talking about them, what are they looking to do, what type of attacks are they planning. So we've been infiltrating a number of different forums and a large part of the dark web to retrieve relevant information. And within the portal itself, we provide a bit like a Google search within the dark web, so organizations don't have to go in through an onion browser to look at that information. We pull that information back and present it in a clean and easy way to see and action. As I mentioned earlier, data leakage is still very apparent. We're certainly seeing lots of health records and things at the moment, which is interesting with what's going on in terms of the pandemic. So discovering sensitive data, and the type of parameters that you put in for data leakage include things like project names, presentation names, things like that. And then again, we continuously scan the internet for that information and return that as soon as we find it. The hacktivism module really helps out when it comes to understanding those social born operations. So groups like Anonymous who are looking to potentially target other organizations, looking to monitor that and get ahead of the curve. Some of the customers that we work with, certainly in the financial services sector, use our hacktivism module to not just bolster their cyber security, but also their physical security if people are looking to organize demonstrations outside of their banks. So they can then start to bolster physical security to make sure that they're properly protected. Social media is really important. We're doing a lot of work with organizations globally that want to protect their brand and know what's being talked about. So social media is useful to understand across those media channels who's saying what and what are they saying, so you can quickly see that and refine that information. There are some really good advanced filtering capabilities within ThreatCompass that enable organizations to hone in on that specific information. So if, for example, jumping back to data leakage or even social media, if you used a fairly generic term, you might end up with quite a bit of information, but using the advanced filters, you can absolutely filter that right down to ensure that that noise is kept to a minimum so that your team can focus specifically on the targeted attacks and targeted information. Similar to domain protection, we offer a rogue mobile apps module, and that is again looking in the alternative market stores and in alternative app stores for organizations or criminals that are looking to present your app as if their own, whether it's modified and copied apps. Quite often we can see by the size of the application whether or not that is something that is an official app or an unofficial app. And that can quickly get taken down. We provide takedown services across some of those areas, whether it's domain protection and rogue mobile apps to help our customers get that taken down quickly. The malware module is specifically detecting malware and analyzing that behavior to understand. So that's when somebody is specifically targeting your organization with that specific malware. And we have an excellent team. We have a sandbox that customers can upload malware to, so that we can work with them, and our labs team can work with them to go through what we're seeing and ensure that that's best countered and understood from our labs team. And then we also have threat context. So threat context is a slightly different module to the other 9 that I've spoken about. Those other 9 need an input in order to go and find that information. So credentials, for example, is all around domains and IP addresses. Data leakage and dark web is often the different keywords that you'll be using and things. And threat context is a knowledge portal to help teams understand what are the threats out there, who are the actors, what are the campaigns, and really what CV is it relating to, and you can pivot and work your way through exactly what is happening out there with some of the malware that you may well have seen or may well have encountered. So just a few statistics around some of these modules that we've got. Regarding botnet credentials, we've found an increase of 240% over the last 2 years when it comes to extracting credentials from botnet. So that's a massively growing area and really important. And when we find credentials within a botnet, that means that it typically hasn't been used yet. So that's a really hot piece of information to action. When it comes to credit cards as well, we've had an increase between 2018 and 2019 of nearly 50%. So we're seeing over 3 million stolen credit cards and returning that information back to those providers. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just large organizations that are suffering from this. Sub 250 employee organizations make up about 30% of the breaches that are seen. So it's a big raft, and the great thing with Blueliv is that we can play in both those small, medium and large organizations, and also with the lower maturity leading to a higher level of maturity as well. So here's a quick look at the dashboard itself when logging into ThreatCompass. It's very easy to use in terms of the credentials, in terms of the different modules that we've got. We've got a number of different, it's about 46 different dashboard reports. So it's very easy to see the information that is relevant to yourself and grow from that and build upon that. In terms of the modular, look, we've only got 3 different areas to look at. What are those threats? And this is the content that is coming back. You can then start to rate that information. It's aligned with a traffic light protocol as well. And you can start to tag and label the information that you're seeing. So it's very easy to sort, it's very easy to filter. And you can also create your own incidents within ThreatCompass, or all that information could be fed through to your other security solutions in place. And so for settings, it's very easy just to input the top level domain, and we'll then look out on the internet for those specific domains, for those specific for emails that are relating to your organization. So as a company ourselves, as I mentioned, we've been around for about 10 years. It was founded by Danny Solis, who is an ex-senior partner for cyber within KPMG. We had the product itself was fully productized about 6 years ago, and shortly after that we received a Gartner Core Vendor Award. And having worked at Gartner for 4 years, I know the importance of that in terms of disrupting the marketplace, and so that was really good to see. We've continued to grow year on year, and we now have over 140 customers in more than 30 countries. So continue to grow, and yes, we are European based, but we're seeing a lot of growth across Latin America at the moment, Asia Pacific as well, and the Middle East as well. Lots of interesting customers that we're talking to in those areas, and our strategic partners that we're working with, people like ISOC 24, continues to grow as well. So that's good positioning. Here's some of the useful reports that I mentioned. So things like the Buyer's Guide to Threat Intelligence talks about what's useful for companies that we deal with. We have industry specific papers as well, which again is a useful read if you're within those areas. I'd recommend having a look at the credential theft ecosystem. That is talking about how credentials are used and reused and what those criminals are looking to get from it. And obviously with lots of the pandemic going on, we've also released some pharmaceutical and medical device intelligence and a report called Sounding the Farmer Alarmer. And as briefly touched on earlier, the dark commerce report is also something that we have covered as well. So I think really to conclude, threat intelligence is continuously evolving. It's becoming more and more important. Certain countries that we're talking to, well, actually globally now, it's becoming much more of a recognized sector and with a very fast growth rate to it. And from our perspective, it's much more about simplifying actionable intelligence, getting that information quickly to customers so they can do something about it, and making it commercially acceptable as well because of the way that we approach this. So with that pretty much covers what I wanted to include today. So Mark, I'm not sure whether or not any questions have popped up throughout the presentation, but it'd be good to take some of those now.
Question coming in. What about the setup in modules? Can you actually buy different modules separate, since in some cases not all modules are necessary?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a big differentiator for us. The modular approach, especially in this day and age with what's going on around us, budgets are going to be very, very tight. Companies may have already invested quite a lot of money in threat intelligence and may be looking to reduce that budget. With the Blueliv modular approach, we can just specifically talk about those use cases. And you know, I work with some extremely large banks that just specifically use us for our credit card function, working with their fraud team. Or I work with some large telcos that are mostly focused on the credentials aspect as well. So not all of our customers have all of those modules. Some start with one or two and then gradually build out once they see the value. And some companies might not necessarily need some of those modules. So it's very quick to cancel out some of the modules that may not be relevant as well.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Other question that's coming in is it possible to use an API when connecting the solution to my SIEM, for instance? Can you explain a bit about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have a very open API that can enable organizations to integrate specific information into their SIEM if it's there already, or their source solution. So we have a very open way of working, so that can be set up extremely quickly. It's something that we can demonstrate quickly. But it's really important now. You know, organizations have spent a lot of money on SIEM solutions, and we can work across the board with those to ingest that information so that can be actioned quickly alongside all those other areas and intelligence and alerts that are coming in.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question coming in from Osgan. I am going to unmute him. I just sent a message, so please ask your question, Osgan.
My question is, first of all, if it is possible to share this presentation also with us. And the real question behind this is it also possible to use this solution only based on need, that means not only based on modulaire. Maybe
there's a bit of a scramble. I can't hear you too well. Mark, can you hear okay?
I can't hear it as well. Can you please type it in, the question, please?
Really?
I will unmute you because we cannot hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I heard the first part, which is that the presentation is going to be shared. So absolutely. Unfortunately, it was too much crackling on the line, so I couldn't quite hear that. If we can use the chat function to ask the question, then we'll come back to you on that.
Yes, I've requested that to Oskan, so hopefully he will respond with the question. Another question popping in is, can the Blueliv feed be incorporated in my tip in an easy way? How does that work?
Absolutely. So ThreatCompass can be integrated into the tip, as can our machine readable threat intelligence feed as well. And that's something that we have out of the box connectors to different tips. We work across the board with a number of threat intelligence platforms as well to populate that information, because there's not a lot of use for a tip if it isn't populated with good intelligence as well, and that's absolutely where we can come into that, either through our targeted threat intelligence solution, ThreatCompass, or with the machine readable threat intelligence, MRTI.
Okay, thank you very much. The question of Oskan is it possible to use this solution only based on a need? Example given in case of an investigation.
It's a good question, and we get it quite often. Basically, what we're looking to work with customers on isn't just kind of pinpointing, just have it in place for a couple of weeks and take it away. We're much more specific to, well, much more looking at continuous monitoring, because obviously in security you could be set up one day, look at what is there, and that's fine, and we can use that. But typically the contractual agreements that we have are in excess of a year. 3 years is pretty much the standard. So in terms of doing a short, sharp piece of investigation work, it could potentially work. But we are looking for customers and working with customers that want that to be there continuously, to continuously monitor that. So it is possible. Commercially, we need to make sure that it makes sense as well for customers. But it's something we could discuss further if that is one of your use cases.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Hope this answers the question.